We have to make the intentional effort to move outside of our comfort zones to get new input in order to think differently. We need to move to the fringe. You can learn from the edge of the field. You can do it in your own field. Almost all creativity begins on the edge. It doesn't begin in the center. It moves from the outside in, not from the inside out. So years ago, I knew we lived in a mission field. I didn't know how to think like a missionary. So I went to the International Mission Board and said, help me learn to think like a missionary thinks. Help me know how to think like they think in the rest of the world so that I can make change in the way I think and what we do here in Houston. You can learn from your own field, but you can also learn from other fields. We really can learn from business and the arts and the media and science and other fields because they have much to teach if we're willing to learn. But the main thing is we just have to learn new strategies for thinking. And here I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But just some things like being continually curious. Challenge your assumptions. How hard is that? Think of Peter and taking the gospel to the Gentiles. And how hard it was for him to suspend his assumptions till Jesus encountered him in a dream and said, everything that God has made is good. Didn't you read that back in the book of Genesis? And God said it was good. Don't call that which God has made good bad. But that pattern of thinking had been ingrained into him for so long that Jesus had to work hard to get it out of him. Suspend your assumptions. Generate options. And there's lots of ways of generating options. Random words, random objects, think opposite, begin at the end, something called PMI, plus, minus, and interesting. You create 3 categories about an idea. Well, this is a plus about it, this is a minus about it, and this is really interesting about it. Most often when we get in that, we cut ideas down because of the minuses. But if we can say, well, this is positive, this is minus, but I'll let that go for right now because this over here is really interesting, we can begin to generate options. It's just a different way of thinking. Mine. And I really do mean like mine by digging deeply. Combine and connect ideas together. As we look to the future, we have to be able to see what doesn't exist if we're going to think differently. Michelangelo was approached by the cathedral in Florence to create something out of a block of marble. And what he ultimately created was a statue of David. But what most folks don't know is that same block of marble was given by the cathedral to 2 very famous sculptors 40 years earlier. And the marble was flawed. And try as they might, they couldn't create something out of a flawed piece of marble. So they gave it back. And they said, get us an unflawed piece of marble. And the cathedral had a major investment in this 16-foot piece of marble. And so they went out and they got somebody else, another sculptor to try, and another sculptor, and another sculptor. And nobody could do anything with it, and 40 years went by. And they engaged Michelangelo. In about 16 months, he created the statue David from a flawed piece of marble because he saw what nobody else could see. Aren't you glad that God can look at us as flawed pieces of marble and create what he calls his poem, his work of beauty. We serve flawed churches and a flawed association. But I think with God's help, we can create that masterpiece. If we're willing to think creatively, to work collaboratively with God and our best thinking, and try and create a future that nobody else sees right now. That's my prayer for us.